The studio lights of Loose Women glowed warmly, casting a polished sheen across the familiar panel desk as the audience applauded the start of the live broadcast. There was an unmistakable buzz in the air, the kind that came when a major guest was seated among the hosts. Colin Firth sat upright in his chair, impeccably dressed, hands loosely folded, his expression courteous but guarded. Years of red carpets and interviews had taught him how to project ease, even when the questions drifted into uncomfortable territory. Across from him, Denise Welch leaned slightly forward, her posture relaxed but alert, eyes bright with curiosity and something sharper beneath the surface. The other panelists smiled, shuffling their cue cards, unaware that the calm atmosphere was about to fracture. The conversation began smoothly enough. Colin spoke thoughtfully about his latest project, his voice measured and gentle, offering anecdotes about filmmaking and the responsibilities that came with portraying complex characters. The audience listened attentively, laughing at the right moments, nodding along as Denise interjected with light-hearted commentary. She praised his career, his consistency, his reputation for being one of Britain's most respected actors. Colin smiled politely, offering thanks, the exchange flowing exactly as producers would have hoped. Then the topic subtly shifted. Denise tilted her head, her tone still conversational but with a new edge. "You've often played men of principle," she said, tapping her card lightly against the desk. "Do you ever worry that the industry protects people like you while others don't get the same grace?" The question lingered, hovering between curiosity and accusation. The audience quieted slightly, sensing a tonal change. Colin's smile tightened, though he maintained eye contact. "I think the industry is complicated," he replied carefully. "I wouldn't say anyone is protected in the way people imagine. Accountability matters, and it should apply to everyone." Denise nodded, but she didn't let the moment pass. "But you must see how power works," she continued. "Certain voices are heard more clearly than others. Certain mistakes are forgiven more quickly." Her voice remained calm, but the implication was unmistakable. One of the panelists shifted in her seat, glancing briefly toward the camera before back at Colin. Colin inhaled slowly. "I don't deny privilege exists," he said, choosing his words with precision. "But I also think it's dangerous to assume intent or protection without evidence. That kind of narrative can oversimplify very real issues." The audience murmured softly. Denise's expression hardened, just a fraction. "With respect," she said, leaning in now, "it's easy to talk about oversimplification when you're not the one affected. People watching at home don't always get the benefit of nuance when they're the ones being shut out." The temperature in the studio shifted. What had been a friendly discussion now carried a sharp undercurrent. Colin adjusted in his chair, his fingers interlacing more tightly. "I'm not dismissing those experiences," he said, "but I don't think turning every conversation into an indictment helps anyone. We should be aiming for solutions, not assigning blame." Denise raised her eyebrows. "That sounds very convenient," she replied. The word hung heavy in the air. A ripple of reaction moved through the audience, a few gasps quickly stifled. One of the hosts attempted to interject, offering a bridging comment, but Denise pressed on before the moment could be smoothed over. "You speak about solutions," she said, her voice firm now, "but people in positions like yours rarely step aside to make space. They talk about fairness while still benefiting from a system that favors them." Colin's composure began to strain. His jaw tightened, though his tone remained controlled. "I've spent decades supporting initiatives for inclusivity," he said. "I don't think it's fair to suggest I've done nothing simply because I don't perform outrage on television." The words landed harder than intended. Denise straightened, her eyes narrowing. "So now outrage is performative?" she asked. "For many people, it's lived reality." The studio was silent now, every camera trained on the exchange. Producers exchanged anxious glances behind the scenes, fingers hovering near communication headsets. Colin shook his head slightly. "That's not what I said," he replied, though a note of frustration crept into his voice. "I'm saying that meaningful change doesn't come from confrontation designed to score points." Denise laughed once, sharply, without humor. "Score points," she repeated. "You think this is about points? This is about responsibility." Her voice rose just enough to crack the polished calm of the set. The other panelists sat frozen, unsure whether to step in or let the exchange play out. Colin leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "And I think ambushing guests under the guise of discussion isn't responsible either," he said. The moment the words left his mouth, the tension spiked. The audience reacted audibly now, whispers and murmurs spreading through the rows of seats. Denise's expression changed completely. Gone was the conversational warmth, in its place was something steely and unyielding. Ambushing, she said, you agreed to come on a show that discusses real issues. If that makes you uncomfortable, perhaps that says more about you than the question. A beat of silence followed, thick and oppressive. Colin's eyes flicked briefly toward the hosts, then back to Denise. His voice, when he spoke again, was noticeably colder. I came here expecting a conversation, not a character judgment. And I'm judging the system, Denise shot back, one you're very happy to benefit from. The studio felt suddenly smaller, the walls pressing in under the weight of the exchange. The audience sat rapt, aware they were witnessing something far removed from the usual daytime banter. A producer's voice crackled faintly through an earpiece, urging a shift in topic, but neither Colin nor Denise appeared willing to let go. Colin's politeness finally cracked, just enough to reveal the strain beneath. If this is how the discussion is going to proceed, he said, his words clipped, then I question the purpose of my being here. Denise met his gaze without blinking. Maybe that's the question you should be asking yourself, she replied. The atmosphere in the Loose Women studio shifted the moment Colin Firth returned from the short commercial break. The chatter that usually filled the gaps between segments was gone, replaced by a taut, uneasy quiet that seemed to press down on everyone present. Denise Welch sat upright at the panel, her jaw set, fingers interlaced so tightly her knuckles had turned pale. The confrontation from moments earlier still hung in the air, unresolved, pulsing beneath the studio lights. The cameras were live again, red indicators glowing like silent witnesses, and everyone, from the hosts to the floor managers, knew this was no longer a routine daytime television moment. Colin took his seat with visible reluctance, smoothing the front of his jacket as if the simple act of composure required deliberate effort. His usual calm, affable demeanor had been replaced by a restrained intensity. He glanced briefly toward Denise, then away, fixing his gaze on a spot just past the main camera. The polite smiles that typically framed these discussions were absent now, replaced by tight expressions and controlled breathing. The audience sensed it immediately. The low murmur that rippled through the studio carried equal parts curiosity and apprehension. Denise broke the silence first. Her voice was steady, but there was a sharp edge beneath it, honed by years of live television and unfiltered debate. I think what matters here, she said, leaning forward slightly, is accountability. When public figures speak, their words carry weight, whether they intend them to or not. Her eyes met Colin's, unflinching. The statement was measured, but unmistakably pointed, reopening the wound the break had failed to close. Colin inhaled slowly before responding, as if choosing restraint over instinct. With respect, Denise, he said, his tone calm but firm, there's a difference between accountability and misinterpretation. I've been very clear about my intentions, yet they seem to be repeatedly reframed. His voice never rose, but the firmness in it carried across the studio. The audience reacted with a collective shift, sensing the confrontation reigniting rather than cooling. Denise shook her head, a short, dismissive motion. Intent doesn't erase impact, she replied quickly. And when you dismiss people's reactions as misinterpretation, it comes across as tone-deaf. The words landed heavily. A few audience members murmured in agreement, others stiffened in discomfort. The co-hosts exchanged glances, silently debating whether to intervene or let the exchange run its course. Colin's composure cracked just enough to be noticeable. His lips pressed together briefly before he spoke again. I'm not dismissing anyone, he said, leaning forward now, mirroring Denise's posture. But I won't accept being spoken to as though I've acted in bad faith when I haven't. His voice carried a sharper edge than before, controlled but unmistakably irritated. The shift was subtle, but it changed everything. The tension escalated rapidly. Denise responded without hesitation, her words quick and emphatic. Then perhaps this isn't the right space for you, she said. This show thrives on open discussion, not defensiveness. The statement drew an audible reaction from the audience, a ripple of gasps and murmurs that made the studio feel suddenly smaller, more claustrophobic. That was the moment producers began to move. In the control room, voices overlapped through headsets, urgent but restrained. On the studio floor, a stage manager edged closer, ready to step in if necessary. The co-hosts attempted to redirect the conversation, one of them clearing her throat and gesturing lightly toward the cue cards, but the effort fell flat. The confrontation had taken on a momentum of its own. Colin straightened in his chair, the politeness he was known for now visibly strained. If open discussion means being talked down to, he said, then perhaps you're right. His words were calm, but the implication was unmistakable. A hush fell over the room, heavy and absolute. Even the audience seemed to sense that something irreversible was about to happen. Denise opened her mouth to respond, but she never got the chance. A producer's voice cut in through her earpiece, and her expression flickered with surprise, then resignation. She glanced briefly toward the camera, then back at Colin. "We're being told to pause this conversation," she said, carefully, the professionalism never fully leaving her tone.